Hello, welcome back to my channel. For those that do not know me, my name is Sherwin, and today the topic which I will deep dive in is housing prices still affordable? Why I find it an interesting topic, it's because during the general election, this was brought up multiple times by be it opposition or our leading party PAP. And the main issue here is housing prices is getting more and more expensive, that it is no longer affordable. So you can see all the news here, all the articles that have written about rising home prices. So before we deep dive in, the question which I would like to answer is this true? And the second thing which we do have to define for this question is, what do we mean by affordable or affordability? So what is housing affordability? I actually went to Google, and this is what I got from the AI overview. Housing affordability refers to the ability of individual or household to afford the cost of housing within their income constraint. I totally agree, and they also broke it down into three components: income affordability, purchase affordability, and lastly, repayment affordability. There's a global benchmark, right, that 30% of your gross money income should be the max that goes towards your housing payment. That would be how they define affordability. And how our government have such things in place is they have the MSR and TDSR, which keeps our loan in check. One more important thing to highlight when it comes to affordability is the price to income ratio. So what do I mean by that? This is a very good indicator. It means if 1 year your annual income is 100,000, assuming you do not spend this 100,000 and just use the full 100,000 towards a home payment, if the house is 500,000, the price to income ratio would be 5, because it will take you 5 years to pay off the entire property. And there's actually a guideline for this of what is an affordable range or a decent range for price to income ratio, be it for private or public housing, which I'll show you later, and where Singapore stands. Another rule which our CPF used to determine whether your property is affordable to you is or rather whether you can afford to buy a new home, is the 335 rule. So you can see from the chart over here, right, your initial capital should be 30% of the property asking price. And from what our government did with HDB and private, our initial down payment is already 25%, which is very close to the 30%. And your monthly mortgage should not exceed 1/3 of your monthly salary, which is the 30% which I spoke about regarding the global benchmark. And lastly, the property price should not be more than 5 times of your annual income, your household annual income. So, like I said, if your household is making 200,000 a year, most likely you can only purchase, it is advisable to purchase a $1 million property. So if you can match this 335 ratio, then your new home is safe and affordable to you. Of course, these are just some guidelines, and we will use this to determine whether housing prices are within this range. After knowing the criteria on how to judge affordability, let us deep dive into, is HDB still affordable for the median income? And after that, we'll look at private housing. So the first criteria, right, will definitely be the purchase criteria. If you look at HDB median income, right, or rather Singaporeans median income, based on this article in 2024, the median income for Singaporeans is around 11,000 per month, which works out to be around 130,000, 32,000 per year. So based on 11,000, right, their loan affordability based on 3.5% interest and a 30 years repayment loan tenure, they can borrow up to 734,000. And the max purchase, if they have the 25% down payment, is a round-up figure of 980,000. And if you look at the article on HDB website, the average and median prices for HDB resale of 4 and 5 bedder are respectively 612,000 and 590,000. Of course, this is in 2024. I believe 2025, it would have appreciated by a bit, not a lot, maybe by a few percentage points. But just based on purchase affordability, it is well within a median income means to buy a 5-room HDB. Of course, if you look at the chart here, different area will have different pricing. Some of the more popular area, prime area like Bukit Merah, the 5-bedroom is around 920,000. Kallang Whampoa is around 869,000. Whereas if you compare to areas like Choa Chu Kang, the 5-room is only around 540,000, and Jurong West is only 521,000. But we take an average, everything still falls within the purchase affordability. So the next point which we will use to judge will be the repayment affordability. If you remember just previously, I mentioned about 30% as the percentage point which measures the affordability of mortgage versus your monthly income. So if you don't exceed 30%, it still falls within the affordable range. If we were to buy something at 800,000, I think it's slightly above average for a 5-room, the monthly repayment will be 3,592, which works out to be around 32% of your 11,000 monthly household income, which is still slightly above the affordable range. But if we were to take into account that the interest I used to calculate this is 3.5%, right? Compared to the interest now, which is around 2.5, 2.6%, it will definitely fall within 30%. So for that, I would say HDB repayment affordability is still within that affordability range. And lastly, which I feel is the most important, will be the home price to income ratio. Based on this HDB article over here, which we put in our website, right? In 2024, that ratio was 3.8, and in 2023, that during COVID that ratio was actually 5.3. So what does this mean? It means that firstly, our income is increasing, and secondly, the HDB is getting more and more affordable. But of course, that is assuming the prices are 590,000 and 612,000 respectively. But let's be more realistic. We use 800,000 as a gauge because I feel most of the resale property out there for the slightly better area, they are all hovering around 800, 900,000 range. So if you use 800,000 as a home price and we divide by your annual income of 132,000, which is the median income, that ratio works out to be around 6.06, which is slightly above what it was being presented, which was 5 times the annual income. So it's around 6 times of the annual income if you are looking to buy something at $800,000. So if we were to judge based on these 3 criteria, right, income, repayment, and home price to income ratio, I personally think that income and repayment affordability falls well within the definition of affordable housing for the masses. But home price to income ratio is debatable because there are prime areas where HDB are selling above $1 million. Then it's very hard to keep that ratio below 5, which is an acceptable standard released by our government. But of course, those that are buying in prime area, they would definitely earn slightly above the median income. So next, let's start to look at private property. So instead of the median income, let's look at whether the top 20% can still afford private property in Singapore. Because if you look at the ratio, private properties only forms about 20% of Singapore home ownership. And first thing we will determine would be the purchase affordability. Okay, look at this chart here. Average, I would say the top 20%, they are earning around $20,000 per month on a household basis. And how much they can purchase based on 20,000, right? They can loan up to 2.45 million, and max purchase price is 3.26 million. And if we were to compare this to the table over here, where they say that in 2024, the average transaction from different areas, OCR is 1.65, RCR is 2.1, and CCR is 2.9 million. If you are earning 28,000, you can well afford to buy within this average price. Of course, I believe based on my sensing on the market and the buyers I've been serving, 1.65 is very hard to get something around 91 square meter, which translates to be about a 3-bedder because everything has appreciated. You need at least 1.8, 1.9 million for OCR property. So I would say I would take the gauge of 2.1 million as a starting point for me to form my analysis. So if you're earning, your earning is top 20% at 20,000, 2.1 million is something that is within the range that you can purchase. So if it's within the purchase affordability, the next would be the repayment affordability. Based on 2.1 million, the 75% loan will be at 1.581 million, and your monthly mortgage payment is $7,000. If you were to compare this to your monthly income, that will work out to be around 35%, which is slightly above the guideline given on a global standard. But of course, I'm still using a 3.5% interest. And if we were to factor in a slightly lower interest rate at 2.6 or 2.5%, I believe it will be closer to 30%. So yes, for the top 20% earners, the repayment affordability is still well within that range. And lastly will be the home price to income ratio. If we were to divide based on how much they earn, right? 20,000 for a year, they'll be earning around 240,000. And if we were to divide it by 2 million, or rather 2.1 million divided by 240,000, the home price to income ratio will be around 8.7, which is higher than the given standard of 5. So this is something to take into account. And to summarize it here, income affordability for the top 20% is definitely not an issue. Repayment affordability slightly above, and home price to income ratio definitely above. But today the debate is not whether the top 20% earners can own a private property, right? It's more of whether property in general is affordable to the masses. If you're talking about public HDB property, definitely yes. But that step towards owning a private, I would say it's getting tougher. Because if we were to look at the stats, if you are a median income of 11,000, can you afford to own a $2 million property? Your loan is only at 1.347 million based on TDSR, and the max purchase price is 1.8 million. So you fail the first purchase affordability already. Because I would say averagely a 3-bedroom now will cost you $3 million. Secondly, your repayment affordability will fall at 55% because your monthly mortgage is around, if you buy something at 2 million, which we touched on previously, is around $7,000. So monthly mortgage will be higher than what is expected of the 30%, close to 60-70%, which is also not affordable for the median income. And lastly, home price to income ratio will fall at 16. So what is frustrating on the ground for most HDB upgraders or homeowners is the step to upgrading to a private. In the past, it is much easier, but the growing gap between HDB and private is widening. As you can see from the chart over here, if we were to compare in the past, maybe 20 years ago, it's only at 172%, the gap between HDB and private, and fast forward 10 years later at 2015, it's only at 180%, but today in 2025, that gap have actually increased to more than 200%, or to be accurate, 225%. So that is why I feel Singaporeans are having issues with lah. To me, I personally think that the government is doing a good job trying to moderate HDB prices. It's not a matter of how, but it's a matter of when the price will start to stabilize and come down even more with more supply coming to the market. We do not see that immediate effect because HDB do take time to build and it takes time to MOP as well. But once these 100,000 supply start to flood the market, people have more choices to choose from. When supply outweigh demand, we all know that prices will start to come down. But something more tricky would be the private property market. Because if you look at my previous video, there's diminishing supply, new launch supply coming up in the OCR and RCR market. So with this lower supply coming up in the market, right, it would definitely drive the prices up again. Or even if our government were to release more land in the OCR and RCR area, the land cost would not be cheaper than last year. So we all know, right, if the land cost as a base price is not cheap, the launch price would not be cheap as well. Should government be releasing more executive condo to make this private property or semi-private property affordable to the masses? Because it just acts like a stepping stone, right? Classic example will be area of Tampines versus Park Town. The PSF difference is so much, but because of the restriction in place, it actually benefits Singaporeans, which falls within their income or whatever requirement, and it was sold out within their launch. I think 100% sold out already by now. So personally, I would like to see our government releasing more executive condo because it would elevate the stress, or rather concerns for people that genuinely want to upgrade to a property but finds that private property gap is getting larger and larger. So in summary, yes, public housing is still affordable, but private housing is very debatable. So before you purchase any property, make sure to do your stress test right and your affordability test right, rather than just diving head in first. That's it for my video today. Thanks for watching.